One of the best and often underrated periods for science fiction was the 1990s. I may have been too young to experience this phenomenon at the time, but all you have to do is just look through the long list of movies, shows, books, games, and comics to see how much of an explosion it truly was. Not only were well-established franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek making bank on almost every front, it was also a time where many new IPs rose up to challenge their success by going against the traditional sci-fi conventions that they had set in stone. In particular, 90s era sci-fi protagonists tended to be more roguish and hard-edged characters who often go over the heads of their superiors in order to solve problems their way, while trying to make sense of the alien environments and cultures they'd been thrust into. At the same time, there was also an effort between the competing sci-fi shows to deliver long-form serialized narratives that would progressively build upon their respective characters and lore across every season. While a lot of 90s entertainment often got criticized for being incredibly cheesy, self-aware to an extent, and overly concerned with looking cool by its standards, that also didn't prevent it from trying to tackle serious drama as authentically straight as possible. You might say that sounds like extreme tonal whiplash, which it sort of is, admittedly, but it's also one of the main reasons why a show like Farscape is still considered to be one of the best sci-fi shows ever made to this day. Because while it does get incredibly silly at points, it also knows precisely when to drop all of the humor in order to put its characters through some of the most harrowing but captivating conflicts I've ever seen. The idea of Farscape came about in the early 90s when Brian Henson, the son of the legendary Jim Henson and heir to his vast animatronic studio, wanted to do a mainstream sci-fi series that would show off what the Henson Company was truly capable of, while striving to create what he and the show's eventual showrunner Rockne S. O'Bannon described as the anti-Star Trek. Instead of being centered around a peace-loving United Federation of planets that's made up of compassionate intellectual types who mainly want to explore and understand each alien species they encounter across the galaxy, Farscape set out to be a bombastic and slightly unhinged space adventure where the main character, John Crichton, would be a man plucked directly from our own time into this completely alien environment and would be just as lost and confused by it and its inhabitants as the audience, as he struggles to find ways just to survive them. What makes Farscape truly stand out compared to any other sci-fi series that's come out before and after is just how committed everyone from the writers to the actors, to especially the set designers and makeup artists were towards making this setting and its characters feel totally alien but believable at the same time. Sure, shows like Star Trek and Babylon 5 had been putting people in alien makeup well before the series' debut in 1999, but Farscape often went the extra mile when it came to making its creatures look and act like truly otherworldly beings whose mannerisms, cultures, and even basic speech patterns are nothing like our own. A large part of that is owed to the amazing creature effects that still look stunning to this day, which all stems from Brian Henson's desire to make every part of Farscape feel as exotic and wondrous as the cantina scene from Star Wars: A New Hope. Of course, the amazing makeup and expert puppeteering work wouldn't count for much if it didn't have solid writing and performances to go with it, and perhaps the greatest strength of Farscape is how it always comes up with exciting new developments for each of its characters, even the ones you would never expect to change so radically, to the point where they almost come across as entirely different people by the end. Farscape may look like an insanely weird cult classic series on the surface, but it was because of its rich storytelling along with its fantastic universe that it ran for 4 entire seasons before the Sci-Fi Channel unceremoniously cancelled it in 2003 on what has got to be the most devastating cliffhanger I've ever seen. Fortunately, Farscape became one of the most famous examples of a cancelled too soon series being given enough support by its passionate fanbase to ensure it received the ending it truly deserved. And throughout this video, I want to explore exactly why this bizarre, Australian-produced LSD trip is truly something special and deserves to be given a chance by anyone who's looking for a new show to binge that I guarantee is unlike anything you've seen before. Well, aside from Guardians of the Galaxy, that is, but even James Gunn himself has come out and admitted that he was heavily inspired by Farscape, and I've seen enough similarities across other modern sci-fi stories that make me suspect that he's far from the only one who took any inspiration from it. As usual, I'll go over the basic premise and then give a general overview of several of the main characters without getting into major spoilers. Also, be prepared to see a lot of clips for this one in particular, because many of the best aspects of this show really need to be experienced to be believed, and I intend to do everything I I can to ensure Farscape gets the justice it deserves, particularly because we rarely get shows that are this deep and hilarious nowadays. So, without further ado, let's tackle Farscape. Farscape tells the story of John Crichton, an astronaut who begins the series testing out a slingshot maneuver in his Farscape module. If his theory turns out to be correct, this could jumpstart humanity's expansion into the stars, but things take an unexpected turn when his module collides with a wave of radiation that ends up creating a wormhole. While John is still trying to process the shock of being thrust into an entirely different part of the galaxy, his module gets pulled onto a fleeing transport of alien prisoners while they're in the middle of pulling off a desperate escape from their captors. During his arrival, John accidentally causes the death of the brother of their commanding officer, Bylar Crace, which then provokes him into swearing bloody vengeance against the unknown human and ensuring that every world affiliated with the Peacekeepers, the fascistic military force who dominates much of this sector, will arrest him on sight and then turn him over to be executed. John has no choice but to team up with the other prisoners, along with one of the Peacekeepers he was caught with, and subsequently got exiled because she spoke up for him by helping them escape the oncoming command carrier aboard their Leviathan transport called Moya, a biomechanical vessel that's operated by an alien everyone refers to as Pilot. From there, John tries to learn as much as he can about how everything in this unfamiliar space works so he can prove to everyone aboard Moya that he's a worthy ally to have as they all travel deeper into the uncharted territories of the galaxy in order to stay free from Crace and the other Peacekeepers.
Crace thinks you killed his brother. In such a case, would you obey jurisdictional boundaries? If you want to live, choose your allegiances carefully. That's not to say that there's any guarantees there.
Hey, Dad. I mean, you're never gonna get this message, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm alive. Don't know where I am. Technically, I don't know how I got here, but I'm not gonna stop trying to get home. And there's life out here, Dad. Weird, amazing, psychotic life. Dad, you know those rattlers in the stomach we talked about? Well, I got them now.
Much of Farscape's first season centers around the crew of Moya learning to work together as a functional team as they encounter a variety of odd beings in a sort of Monster of the Week style format, but by its halfway point, the show makes it abundantly clear that these aren't just standalone adventures that won't have any bearing on the future. One of my favorite examples of this comes in episode 16, which by all accounts appears to be another adventure of the week where John gets his mind felt with by a new batch of aliens and has to deal with a familiar setup that many other shows have done before. I wouldn't blame anyone watching the show for the first time to completely forget about this encounter by the time episode 19 rolls around, which incidentally was exactly what happened with me, but it then turned out to be one of the most pivotal episodes of the entire show by introducing a new plot point that ends up redefining John's entire dynamic with the Peacekeepers and elevates his conflict with them from just being a simple cat and mouse chase. Even though you could make the argument that this revelation came out of nowhere, it still has enough believable context behind it to justify it as a logical direction to take John's story and expand on both the wonders and terrors this galaxy is capable of. At the same time, it also serves as an important milestone for his relationships with each of the characters he travels to that world with by establishing through his desperate efforts to protect them that he's grown to see these aliens as more than convenient allies. Farscape is one of the best examples of a show that blends both episodic storytelling and an overarching serialized narrative, in the sense that you're given plenty of time to learn about its characters through watching them bond together across each bite-sized adventure they share, and then seeing those developments pay off once they're pulled into the main plot and they have to rely on the trust and skills they've built up if they hope to stand a chance against much bigger threats than anything they've faced before. While I've always been a bigger fan of shows where the characters are gradually working towards a larger, overarching goal instead of just having miscellaneous adventures or case of the week style plots, I can also appreciate when a show takes its time to build up the world around the characters and allow them to have small divergent plotlines or even full-blown joke episodes that serve to ease the tension of the main conflict and just lets the cast banter off of one another so the audience can become more endeared to them.
Oh, I must say you handled yourself like quite a man of action today.
Yeah, I'm getting the hang of a few things. Of course, when I do...
Things change and you find you're more confused than you were before.
Yeah, pretty much.
Time and patience.
Crichton, you are my ally. I will not abandon you.
Great. So we can be buried together. I'll deal with this. Who the hell do you think you're shooting at?
How did my client manage to slip past you? Any idea?
It was while we were changing shift. There's a short period of time where that particular cell block isn't fully attended.
But even with that, don't you think somebody would like... You little toad. You had to go for helium now?
I'm nervous. It happens. We're in court, so sue me.
Farscape greatly benefits from this structure because contrary to what any newcomers might assume from all the clips I've been showing so far, this show can often delve into some incredibly dark and depressing subject matter on a whim, to the point where if it weren't for all the makeup and latex, I could easily see several of these events fitting in alongside some of the bleaker moments in Game of Thrones or Sons of Anarchy. That's what really made me appreciate Farscape's style of outlandish, self-deprecating humor, not just for being hilarious and well-executed gags by themselves, but also being aware enough to know precisely when to crack jokes and when to simmer down so the characters can have serious, intimate moments with each other.
When I was first incarcerated on this ship, I could not conceive how I would survive. I heard a rumor that a Luxon warrior was a fellow prisoner. I actually prayed that the brute would succumb to hyperrage and kill me. How ironic is that?
You hold this steady. Be more afraid of what you're aiming at.
I've never done anything like this!
None of us have.
Everything I have seen so far is despicable!
Welcome to the Federation starship SS Buttcrack.
I think it is altogether appropriate that we start off with, in fact, the creator of Farscape, Rockney O'Bannon. So, 20 cycles later, what about Farscape are you most proud of?
But to me, it's the fact that if you watch it today, it's sustained. The effects, the performances, every aspect of it is something that's really stands up, I think, in a particular way. And also, there's a number of things that have come since where the makers have said that Farscape was one of their inspirations.
Such as perhaps Guardians of the Galaxy?
Maybe they'd be getting guessed.
Ben, do you have anything to say about Guardians of the Galaxy?
Art endures, art moves. Product is there for a minute to make a buck, and I think that Farscape is art, which is why it holds up today, which is why it looks, which is why all of you guys are here, because it is art which you relate to, hopefully, and we never underestimated the intelligence of our audience. So, as to Guardians of the Galaxy, man, I think it's great, especially the second one.
The key distinction between this humor and the kind of Marvel-style self-aware quipping that I and many others have grown to despise is that John's jokes are treated more like coping mechanisms for him to better relate to whatever insane situation or creature he's faced with, rather than coming off as forced attempts to make the audience laugh just because he dropped a pop culture reference. In fact, you really don't need to know what he's referencing most of the time to find the joke funny, since it's really the delivery and reactions of the other characters that sell it. That's not to say John doesn't deliver plenty of smarmy quips against the show's many antagonists, but even when he does belittle them directly to their faces, it still doesn't change what a serious threat they can pose, or prevent them from even winning outright and putting John and his friends in an even worse position than they could have possibly imagined. I can understand why there'll be some people who think this looks too ridiculous to take seriously at all, but the simple truth is that one of Farscape's main appeals is how it balances the serious drama with the zany humor, and the show wouldn't be nearly as effective if you took out one or the other. Farscape is fully willing to go in any number of wild directions, and doesn't hold back once it gets there. That's what gives Farscape a wholly unique identity compared to any other science fiction, drama, or comedy story I've ever experienced. And it's what drove me to keep watching even when things got far more sillier or far more grim than I ever anticipated. Well, that and the fact Farscape also happens to have one of the most dynamic and endearing ensemble casts of any show I've seen, so it's high time I stop beating around the bush and begin breaking each of them down.
Right, turn around. No, Skip, don't do that!
Don't move, or I'll fill you full of little yellow bolts of light.
Stay up!
No one like me.
No, he is a criminal.
We all are. And we take her too.
What? Never. I will take you. You are manageable. But
If
she...
she stays, we all stay.
No, I will not come with you.
You've been irreversibly contaminated, remember?
It means death.
It's my duty, my breeding. Since birth, it's what I am.
You can be more.
Like I said earlier, the 90s was an era where a lot more non-traditional protagonists started popping up, and compared to other sci-fi stories at the time, it doesn't really get more non-traditional than John Crichton. That's not to say he's a morally grey anti-hero, but when we're first introduced to him, he's far from any kind of chosen one, wisecracking gunslinger, or a genius savant, although he does prove himself to be pretty smart every now and again. What's most ironic is that John winds up becoming a discombobulated combination of all three of those things across the series, despite just being an average guy who's more well-versed in things like E.T. or older Western classics over most disciplines that are tied to his job of being an astronaut. Farscape often puts John through many harrowing situations that force him to become far more dependable and courageous than he ever was back on Earth, which isn't as easy as it sounds considering he's trapped in a distant part of the galaxy and is surrounded by a host of otherworldly aliens and technology that he can't even begin to understand at first. That's why most of Moya's crew considers him to be a liability when they're first introduced, on top of thinking he's just plain weird from all the unfamiliar references he makes to human pop culture, and for not understanding concepts that are completely mundane to them, like translator microbes that instantly allow anyone implanted with them to understand each other, or even how to open doors aboard Moya. However, the one advantage John does have compared to everyone else who may be smarter, tougher, and more experienced than him is his willingness to approach every bizarre conflict they get wrapped up in from a relatively level-headed perspective, and usually coming up with reasonable solutions to them instead of the bombastic shoot first and ask questions later strategies that Dargo and Aaron Soon specifically are so fond of. The two of them often perceive that as being a weakness, but the simple truth is that John's can-do attitude and his unorthodox way of thinking tends to be what rallies them all to pull together and even serves to bring out each of their better natures through his compassion for others.
Sir?
We got two choices here, Peacekeeper. You can stick around, or you can return to your Captain Crace.
Crichton.
You let us leave. He wants to fight? Fine. Look around and multiply that by thousands.
Brave gamble, Crichton.
Nah, you wouldn't have let him skewer me. Right?
You risked Aaron Sum's life. I would still have preferred killing them on the spot.
Well, this way, there's a chance Grace will catch a hint and leave us alone.
You know, I always thought that lesser life forms were useless. Just something to be squashed.
Yeah, it's humbling when you realize that you're not talking about the Drax, are you? Fine. Well, on behalf of lesser life forms everywhere, I accept the compliment.
Hell, it was through the compassion he showed for them that they managed to escape the Peacekeepers in the first place. Even though their first meeting came off to a very rough start, he's still able to recognize that while all of these aliens may be former prisoners, or a card-carrying member of the Peacekeepers themselves, they're all still desperate people at their core who are doing everything they can to survive in this crazy galaxy, just like him. Don't take any of this to mean that John Crichton's just a wide-eyed Boy Scout with no flaws. To put it simply, John doesn't have a very easy easy time in Farscape, and despite his best efforts to do the right thing whenever he can, the show loves to drop him into outright nightmarish scenarios where he's given no choice but to fight for his survival at any cost. One of my favorite episodes that perfectly demonstrates this comes early on in Season 1, where John and Captain Price are essentially thrown into a battle arena so one of the show's most twisted villains can watch them fight to the death. At first, John tries to do what any conventional hero would in this situation by explaining he never meant to kill Grace's brother and proposing to put aside their differences so they can join forces against their common enemy. It soon becomes clear, however, that Grace isn't willing to let his vendetta go for reasons that go much deeper than him just being a stereotypical villain, so John has no choice but to follow through with the only option he has left.
Maldus is your enemy here, not me.
It won't work. Nothing can stop me from killing you.
Just listen. And you can believe this, or you can shine it. I didn't mean for him to crash. And I'm sorry he's dead.
It doesn't matter. Talvo is dead. Struck down by a weak, pathetic, inferior being. It must be avenged!
Only one of you has to die.
Like that's worth anything.
It's better than Grace's, I assure you.
Grace is an animal. I thought I could reason with him.
You can't. It's him or you.
Shh. Had enough of both of you. When you want gladiators, fine. You got him. Tell Grace that I'm waiting for him. In most drama, we tend to do modern drama and we want to present a role model. Our lead characters, our protagonists should be role models, something that someone can look up to. John Crichton fell off that cart years ago. You know, and am I happy about this? No, Ben Browder's not happy about the fact that, okay, he's going to kill some more people again. But in the course of the drama and in the course of the epic scale of the story that we're telling, as you know, you're talking about a brewing war and conflict which is raging at the other end of the galaxy, John Crichton gets his hands dirty. And he gets his hands dirty for sometimes noble causes and sometimes selfish causes. There's a lot of gray area in that character. That makes it interesting to watch. It makes it interesting to play. You know, I'm dependent upon all of the people around me to make Crichton work.
I know there'll be some people who think that John putting aside his morals when things get tough makes him a weaker character, but I would argue that's precisely what makes him and the world of Farscape so compelling. The crucial lesson he learns from this episode and many others is that he needs to adapt to each new challenge this bizarre and unforgiving galaxy throws at him if he wants to survive. Ironically, John ends up developing the same kind of hardened survivalist mentality that Aaron and Dargo have at the beginning of the series, and given how treacherous and conceited most of the aliens they encounter are, their perspectives make perfect sense, as does the existence of a domineering force like the Peacekeepers to maintain order. However, what sets John apart from the others is his willingness to be reasonable if it's possible for him and whatever alien he's dealing with to come to some form of understanding. Sure, that approach can be misguided and even dangerous at times, but that's how he ends up winning the trust and respect of characters like Dargo, Vigil, and many others over the course of Farscape, because after the way he was treated when he first boarded Moya, John knows better than anyone how dangerous it can be to underestimate others as well.
This isn't gonna work, is it? We're never gonna be friends.
Friendship is a lot to ask.
We can be allies. Warriors on Earth did this to show that they weren't holding weapons. Well, you're a material kind of guy, Rigel. Have some material.
What does that mean?
It means, Sparky, that you're a soulless bastard.
I am not. Look, I know I can be selfish, but given a chance, I can usually...
Do what? Do the right thing?
Yes.
Rigel, I figure the right thing starts at the beginning of the day. Not after you've been caught. Hey, Doggo. How come I'm not afraid?
Fear accompanies the possibility of death. Calm shepherds its certainty.
I love hanging with you, man.
Peacekeeper command carrier is locked onto our position and is moving in.
You guys gotta get out of here. Starburst now.
We cannot leave you and Doggo.
No. We can't, and we won't.
Rigel, this is not the time to give up selfishness. Thanks for everything. Now do what you have to do.
Goodbye.
That also goes for their enemies, and once he sees the threat they pose to him and his new allies, he's not afraid to do just about anything to take them down, whether it's by becoming a ruthless killer like them, outsmarting them at the last second, or making the ultimate sacrifice for the ones he's grown to care about. That's what makes John Crichton one of the most dynamic characters I've ever seen. All of this emotional turmoil and badass conviction wouldn't come off half as strong without Ben Browder's great performance. Between every bizarre alien and the lowbrow toilet humor, it would have been so easy for any actor to just ham things up and not take anything in the show seriously. But just as Farscape itself can go from silly to sincere on a dime, so can Ben Browder whenever the situation calls for it. Whether he's having an intimate heart-to-heart with somebody, or fighting off being mind-controlled while singing the Star-Spangled Banner, there's never a moment where his actions don't feel 100% authentic to the kind of man John Crichton is, even after everything this insane and often cruel galaxy puts him through. It's pretty impressive the more you think about it, because John Crichton is meant to serve as both the straight man for Farscape and the slightly unhinged comic relief character who may crack jokes in the middle of danger, but is also the bravest and most headstrong of Moya's crew when things come down to the wire. John goes through a hell of a lot across Farscape, to the point where I was honestly surprised he didn't go completely insane before the end of season 1, although there's no denying he's definitely got a few screws knocked loose along the way. What's even more impressive is the fact he can still crack jokes and be a hero to others despite everything he's been through, which is the essence of why I like John Crichton far more compared to other quirky, sarcastic heroes we see in modern stories. It always frustrates me seeing these types of characters in superhero movies and action blockbusters who always want to be in on the jokes with the audience and never take things too seriously out of the writer's fear of being seen as either lame or corny. Meanwhile, Farscape fully embraces being lame or corny on many occasions, even becoming an outright Looney Tune at one point, and it still manages to have real heart-wrenching drama in the same episode, all down to the characters treating everything with some degree of sincerity. That's what helps ground Farscape, regardless if it's showing you something completely ridiculous or horrifying, and it's one of the main reasons both the show and John Crichton himself remain unique to this day. Of course, John's far from the only compelling and dynamic character in the cast, and there's no question that many of Farscape's most dramatic and endearing moments wouldn't be half as effective if he didn't have a great leading lady like Erin Sun at his side.
See? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What the frill is that?
Obviously nothing.
You were right. I'll move them to another cell.
They don't need to be moved.
Why not?
Because they're coming with me.
Keep with me!
Who is she?
That is the Radiant Erin Sun.
How many peacekeepers do you know on this base?
You all right, Crichton?
Yeah. How you doing?
I knew next to nothing about Farscape when I first started watching it, but one thing that convinced me to watch the show from beginning to end was seeing Claudia Black as Erin Sun. Having grown up playing video games across the 2000s and the 2010s, I was already a big fan of her work in Uncharted, Dragon Age, and Mass Effect, so getting to see what she could do in live action across an entire sci-fi series was an instant hook for me. I'm happy to say she didn't disappoint at all, and it's thanks to her amazing talents and Farscape's great writing that Erin Sun has now joined my list of phenomenal female characters that more modern writers need to take notes from. On the surface, Erin appears to be the same kind of forced girl boss type character I've criticized in the past, a hard-edged peacekeeper commander who often belittles everyone around her and prefers to solve conflicts attacks by using guns more than wits. However, just as with characters like Starbuck or Fiona, Farscape doesn't let the fact that she's a competent soldier trained from birth prevent her from being a flawed person, nor does it make her invincible in every fight. Being forced to live on the run aboard Moya is arguably more difficult for her than anyone else, because while the rest of them are desperate to get home, Erin has to grapple with the harsh reality that she's been turned away from the only one she's ever known, and it was through doing the honorable thing by speaking up for John that she's been branded a criminal for life. Considering she was raised her entire life to believe that fugitives like them deserve to be hunted down and are inferior to her Sebastian race in general, it's not hard to see why she has trouble fitting in with the others, especially with Dargo and Rigel over everything the Peacekeepers have put them through in particular. Luckily for her, none of that prevents John from trying to get her to open up and be a real team player, which gradually ends up developing one of my favorite relationships out of any story. Even before any romantic spark develops between them, their dynamic is always fun to watch each episode.
Come out from where you're hiding, you cowards!
Dargo!
Peacekeeper coward! You challenge my command. Now, do it to my face and we'll see more than static!
That was your plan?
Yeah, we're pretty good.
Oh, barely. That is the last time I go along with one of your plans.
Fine. Next time you get to make the plan. Whoa, wait, I'm not doing it.
You're doing it barely, but just...
Don't show me. Don't show me. Port side thrusters. Slicker and snot.
My microbes had to have translated that one wrongly.
Southern metaphors, darling. You ain't heard the half of them.
Now you do that one again and I'll kill you.
Oh, sorry. Almost hit that big sun out there.
Are you ready to get a ceasefire my way? Get to the walkway!
2 guns, Aaron! We only have 2 guns!
Well, make it look like more!
How?
Well, keep firing, running backwards and forwards and pretend you're an army!
Oh, yeah, that's gonna work!
Just do it!
What are you doing?
I'll make you like an army! Dargo!
Whoa!
Pony Montana!
The Phoenix are retreating! So I've always played very interesting roles, but certainly over the last few years, very strong ones. And science fiction certainly seems to be the genre for strong lasses. We were in a rare situation filming Farscape because we were on the other side of the world, primarily making it for the Sci-Fi Channel and for the BBC and other European territories. They wanted it to be sassy, they wanted it to be intelligent and sexy and original, and we rose to it, really. And it's now great talking to directors who say that we've changed them and the way that they work, because they're now expecting actors in auditions to come up with suggestions and to have ideas. Poor Erin has gone through so much on this show, and it was part of the appeal of taking the role in the first place. I just felt that she had an incredible arc, potentially. And that was probably realised in season 3, which was the hardest year for Erin emotionally, and for me as an actor, an incredible opportunity.
It's crazy to believe that the showrunners weren't even considering Claudia when they were initially casting for Erin, primarily because they wanted a younger actress with a more Aryan look to better fit the space Nazi motif surrounding the Peacekeepers. Luckily, it was thanks to watching her screen tests with the candidates and how well she clicked with Ben Browder that they realized they already had the best person for the job. That being said, it does take a long while for John and Erin to officially become a couple, and I'd be lying if I said that the romantic tension between them didn't get tedious and drawn out in a few places. However, while Farscape does delve into will they won't they style melodrama more than once, even with a few different characters, it also provides a solid context for why somebody like Erin is so hesitant to admit her true feelings and is apprehensive about getting close to anybody. Peacekeepers, you see, are taught from birth to put their duties above anything else in their lives, lives, and are only allowed to be paired with somebody for the purposes of breeding or relieving stress between missions. Any attachment that goes deeper than that results in that peacekeeper being court-martialed and most likely executed. And there's a great episode at the beginning of season 2 that explores how Eren knows all too well how dangerous attachments can really be. While there's no denying that Eren grows to care very deeply for John, no matter how many times they argue or even outright separate across the show, the one thing her training has never prepared her for is the idea of losing somebody she cares about. As frustrating as it can be at times, Eren's reservations towards being vulnerable around John make sense, because she was literally raised her entire life to reject that kind of thinking. Even so, she's still shown to have a conscience buried beneath all of that peacekeeper bravado, and that's what makes John believe she really can be more than the sum of her training. In that episode I mentioned earlier, that very idea gets explored when an uncomfortable truth from Eren's past resurfaces, causing almost everyone to turn against her. Even Pilot, the only one besides John whom she has a decent relationship with, is ready to strangle her on the spot over her actions, and then proceeds to shut down Moya until she leaves for good. Normally, this would be the point where Eren tries to use some forceful method to solve the conflict, or at least stand up for her actions, but the guilt eats away at her to the point where she agrees that she doesn't deserve to be forgiven, or even remain aboard Moya. This all culminates in John pushing the two of them to make amends any way they can, only for Pilot to reveal his own secret that's been torturing him all this time as well. What comes next is nothing short of a masterpiece performance from Claudia Black, as the two of them finally reach common ground over their guilty consciences, and resolve to take the first steps of finding redemption together.
If you don't come with me, I'll find someone else who will. Someone who isn't afraid to take their place amongst the stars.
So you see, Eren, it wasn't really you who caused her death. It was me. But I just wanted so desperately to see the stars.
Do you remember when you first came aboard, Moya? Elric stroked your cheek like this to calm you. Back then I couldn't fathom why he'd do a thing like that. And now I couldn't fathom not doing it. And we've still got a long way to go. Take the journey with me.
If you've ever wondered why I call stories like The Mandalorian hollow emotional bait, it's because it's missing this kind of brilliant character writing and a satisfying payoff to a story that's been properly established and developed. Eren may be tough because of her peacekeeper upbringing, but it's also the source of her biggest character flaws, and it's through learning to accept those parts of herself and putting those skills towards the benefit of the people she's grown to see as her true family, or true love in John's case, that she becomes a better and far stronger person than she ever could have imagined. One of the most satisfying moments of the entire show comes near the end of season 1, where she confronts Captain Grace directly and lays this all out to him before denouncing the peacekeepers forever.
I am irreversibly contaminated. Does this contaminate you, Grace?
As a peacekeeper, you took a blood oath to obey your commanding officer.
Yes.
I am still your commanding officer.
But I am no longer a peacekeeper.
You are a peacekeeper for life.
Your oath means nothing to me. You made sure of that. You destroyed everything. I lost everything because of you.
Eren, son.
Do you know what I learned while I was away from you? Everything I lost isn't worth a damn. And I don't want to go back to your past.
I order you.
You order me! You will never order me again.
I will track you down and kill you, Officer Son. On that I give you my vow.
You know what I give you, Grace?
Don't take that to mean, however, that all their problems are magically solved once they get together, which is honestly refreshing compared to many sappy love stories that end in true love being the answer to everything. But no matter how many times the universe conspires to tear John and Eren apart, I always found myself rooting for them to pull through it, because they really do inspire the best out of each other. There's no question that if John had never met Eren, he would have lost his mind and given up a long time ago, just as she would remain a lost soul with no place to belong among the peacekeepers peacekeepers, but it's because the two of them were able to bond as mutual outcasts among their people and recognize there's much more to each of them than what's on the surface that they managed to survive the worst this galaxy can throw at them and become just as big of a threat to their enemies. If that's not the making of a true romance for the ages, then I don't know what is. It's natural to assume that John and Aaron are destined to be a couple just because he's the central protagonist and she's the closest thing to a human in this part of the galaxy. But Farscape also shows that despite the many cultural and biological differences, there's also just as much time devoted to the more subtle, intimate ways they play off each other that helps to cement the idea that these two characters would still be friends turned lovers regardless of what species they belonged to. Frankly, I could say the same thing about Ben Browder and Claudia Black in real life, and since I couldn't think of a better place to put this clip, let this serve as undeniable proof about just how perfectly these two fit together, both on and off screen.
You know, I mean, the cultural difference between the Farscape set and the Stargate set is also vast. Sort of Stargate, they kind of knew what they were doing. This is what we're about. It's 10 seasons. Farscape, we would just make things up how we're going to do it. When we came in, we would shoot one episode and we're going, the whole episode's going to look like Saving Private Ryan. And the next episode, it would call for a monster and you'd show up and the monster looked like a piece of, you know, chicken.
Tandoori
It looked like tandoori chicken. Anyway, he's there.
He's got these sort of little wings on the side.
Looks like chicken wings.
The creature has these little sort of chicken wings.
Red little chicken wings.
And the actor has been asked, the performer has been asked to react to the bullets, and he does that. He does exactly what he's asked as directed. What ends up resulting is this.
But the story's not over with. So Claude and I look at one another, and he says, he was
chicken wings
so
flapping
pissed
around
off.
everywhere. The suit itself just looked so absurd, and he was supposed to be a really scary creature.
Yeah, and he was taking the scary thing to, he wanted to be scary.
Well, it was also an important moment in Farscape because we realised that what's on the page and what gets delivered to us from the creature shop with all the time constraints that they have and what have you, you have to go with what you're given on the day. You can't just, you know, go with what's written sometimes. And so that started to really inform what we did.
The popular pop culture references you had on Farscape, Crichton always made them to the crew. Obviously, they didn't understand them because they were alien or Australian, I don't know.
Same.
Did you understand most of them, and were they scripted, or did you have some kind of improvisation? Could you make them up yourself?
Ben always lies when he answers this question. Toodaloo-doo-doo-doo, he's looking at the floor.
They were all scripted.
Ben always lies when he answers that question. Toodaloo-doo-doo. Oh, what's over there?
If you grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek like I did, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you know, all of these great shows, and I read a lot of science fiction. If you grew up with that, then Crichton is your guy. He's your proxy out in the universe because he looks at it and he goes, those are Klingons, right? I went to the writers and said, all right, I don't know Klingon, but I need a Klingon line because they look like Klingons, you know? So I wanted to yell at them in Klingon just to prove how geeky Crichton was. So I got to yell in Klingon. It's awesome.
Kapla.
Yeah. No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for bearing with me in this first part of my Farscape review. I didn't initially intend for this video to take so long to make, or for it to be split into 2 parts, but over the course of the editing process, I ended up having a lot more to say about the show than I first scripted, and it got to the point where I realized that if I wanted to do the show the justice I think it deserves, making just one video about everything I have to say will likely go over an hour, and thus take even longer to get out. Fortunately, I already have most of the clips I need to get straight to work on part 2, so I can definitely promise that that one won't take nearly as long to make. However, while I've already gotten started on part 2, there's another video I want to get out first about a topic that's been bugging me for the last several years. All I'll say is, it's about a much smaller series that won't take long to cover at all, and once that's over and done with, I'll have a clear enough mind to finish breaking down Farscape. Until then, I'm the Elusive Eye, and I'll see you soon.